All right. So again, just a reminder to sign in. And then just a few asks during our session. We know we've been doing virtual stuff, and sometimes we get tired of Zooming and Google Meeting and Teaming and all that good stuff, but just assume positive intentions. Sometimes text or things, it's hard to always translate. So just assume the positive intent and then be present. And then we have a couple things here. These are all things we've had in the past. Just, mute yourself when you're not talking or not on camera. If you have a question, throw that in the chat if someone's speaking, and then all of us from Tech Prep and SST are monitoring that, so we'll make sure your question gets answered. And don't worry if you have to step away, something interrupts you. We are recording it so you can get this later. So our team supporting you, we have Rita Graff, the Chief Administrator at Southwest Tech Prep. Want to say good morning, Rita?
Good morning, everyone. Glad you could all join us today.
We have Pam Hunt in the West region. She's the Chief Administrator for Ohio College Tech Prep.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us.
We have Carrie Hunter. She is State Support Team Region 10, and she is working on as a CTPD consultant and a transition consultant this year.
Good morning.
And then me, Melissa, I'm now in State Support Team Region 13 all year. So, and here's our team supporting you right now. Terry is a regional coordinator for the Southwest Tech Prep, and she is at Southern State and Cincinnati State. Terry, do you want to say good morning?
Good morning, everyone.
We have a placeholder. Actually, we're going to have 2 additional regional coordinators for the Southwest region, one for Miami University and one for UC. And Rita is in the process of hiring those individuals now. So next time, hopefully you'll see 5 people here, or on 2 slides, you'll see 5 people. Then in the West region, we have Deb Holthouse, a regional coordinator, and she works out of Edison State. Deb, do you want to say good morning?
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining.
And we also have Rosie Matthews, from a regional coordinator from Clark State. I'm not sure Rosie could join us this morning, so if she pops on, we'll take a minute and have her say hi at the end. But she might be busy with something else. All right, our purpose of the coffee chats, just as a reminder, it's learning hot topics in CTE or just-in-time trainings. And it gives you an opportunity to keep building that professional learning network within CTE. Today's topic is WebXam updates. We're so excited to have with us Bridget McHugh and Richard Huggins from CEAT, the Center on Education and Training for Employment. That is such a long title, but we're so happy to have you with us. And they work out of Ohio State's College of Education and Human Ecology, for where CEAT is located. So I'm going to go ahead and just turn it over to Richard and Bridget.
Well, thank you, Melissa. It's wonderful to see all of you today. Thank you again, Melissa, so much for inviting us. It's always a great opportunity to talk with folks about what's going on with WebXam. With that, I will share my screen. So I'll introduce myself first, even though I'm lower down. So I'm Richard Huggins. I'm the WebXam Service Delivery Lead. And then Bridget, would you like to introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, and so I am the new Program Director of Assessment. If anyone had ever met Jim Austin at any kind of CTE event, I am his replacement, though Jim in many ways was irreplaceable. And I actually have not just an educational background, but I have a like a business psychology background too, where I've done a lot of assessments, not just for CTE, but for employee skills and workforce development in general. So I've worked in HR departments and places like that, measuring these skills as well.
Wonderful. Thank you, Bridget. So we'll get started today. We're just going to talk a little bit about the WebXam calendar. We're going to talk about some changes to how the CTAG testing and assent report works. We're going to dive into some really fun stuff related to how WebXam is now supporting your CTE 26 programs. And then kind of a newish concept in WebXam, maybe a more focused concept in WebXam of district testing coordinators. Then we'll talk about field testing, and I will pass it off to Bridget to talk about opportunities for your teachers to get involved every year. So with that, we'll get going. And I think, as Melissa was saying, if you have questions, put them in the chat, and then we'll go through them at the end of this shared session. So real quickly, just to go over the WebXam calendar because of how important it is, the fall pre-testing window ends this Friday. So if your school hasn't done their pre-testing that they're planning to do yet, got to get it done this week. Field testing and post-testing will then open on October 9th. Field testing, which this year is in the business, finance, and marketing career fields, closes on April 19th. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. More general post-testing across all the other career fields will close on May 31st. And then for semester courses, there is a winter pre-testing window, basically covering the month of January, but that closes on February 2nd. Just keep that calendar in mind, as always, as you're planning your school year. Also, just so you're aware, throughout the year, we offer opportunities for teachers to come to Columbus and to review the WebXam assessments and their courses that they offer. So please check on news.webexam.org for what those dates are and to sign your teachers up if you wish to. So,
Oh, sorry, we have a quick question. I'm sorry to interrupt you. A question about, do the practice tests open the same time as the post-testing window?
yes.
Okay.
Yes, they do. Exactly. Thank you for interrupting to get that in there. Yeah, so practice tests will open at the same time as post-testing. And this year, that's been different from years past. The practice tests will be able to be taken multiple times by teachers and students. In the past, that was limited to once per year. So starting this year, you'll be able to sort of take those multiple times as needed. So just be aware of that. So we do always ask that you check out the, obviously the ODE website, and specifically related to testing policies. There are three or four different testing policies now in terms of when you can test, when you can retake, and all of that kind of stuff. So it's always worth taking a chance to review those policies. The most recent new policy that we started last year was to allow graduating seniors who were using field tested assessments as part of their graduation requirements. Those and they didn't end up passing during the year, they can retake those assessments in one time in the month of May. Well, like starting typically 2 weeks after the field testing window closes. So there is an opportunity for graduating seniors to retake those field tests because they don't really get fully scored until that late April, early May window. So we just want to do everything we could to give those students the opportunity to graduate if they need to retake those tests. So that's the newest policy. And just like I said, I encourage you to give those policies a read. There's been a lot of changes over the last couple of years. And then these last two bullet points will focus on the program and district testing coordinator updates, which I think many of you are aware of, but if not, we'll go through those in more depth here in a little bit. But before we get to that, we'll talk about the excitement of CTAG report changes in WebXam, which I hope these changes will be well received by the field and by you. So the CTAG report, CTAG testing and data assent report is currently in preview mode. It's going to be going into sort of live mode. And as part of that, we're going to be making 3 changes to that report. The first one is now you'll be able to schedule multiple students in one step to update their ascents. In the past, you had to do this one by one by one, and that was obviously suboptimal. So you'll be able to do that all in one step. You'll also be able to schedule those update sessions in advance for students to update those ascents. So if you wanted to have a whole class go in and check their ascents, make sure everything's ready to go, you can schedule that to happen up to a week in advance. And then lastly, the CTAG update process will be using the same sort of access code process that test activation does. And that includes the ability to sort of download PDFs of basically login tickets for those students. And so we can take a look at what that looks like real quickly. So in a testing report, you'll now see over on the far right-hand option, if the test has occurred within the academic year that we're in, you'll be able to select that schedule update checkbox. And you'll select that for each student that is going to be needing to update any ascent information. In this case, you notice I've selected all of the students who had not chosen to agree to the data sharing process. And then you would click that schedule update button at the bottom to sort of move on to the next step in scheduling. And that next step in scheduling will look like this. So you'll see that list of students. If they have an SSID, you'll see it. You'll see what their username and access codes will be once you hit the last button down here. And there's also an option to specify a start time up to a week in advance, as I said. And so once you do that, then you'll see a page that looks like this. This will be familiar to those of you who activate tests on behalf of teachers. You'll see the username and the access code, and you'll have this download button that lets you download a PDF or a CSV file if you prefer, so that your students can all get signed in and take those and update those ascents. So these changes will go live when the post-test window opens. And you'll start to be able to sort of do that again only for tests that have been taken in the current academic year. So that part of it is not changing. Okay, moving on, there are some significant updates to WebXam in terms of programs and district testing coordinators. So I know a lot of you have had to deal with this already. Some of you, maybe who don't do so much pre-testing, some of this will be new to you, but we just want you to be aware and to plan a little bit to address how some of these issues are going to affect your schools. So there's a new
Richard,
role. Yes.
We do have a question in the chat. Sorry to interrupt, but I just want to grab these while we can. Will students ever be able to give prior year assent for tests with proficient or above without having to retest to give assent?
I hope so at some point that we'll be able to do that. The sort of issue here is that at the end of every year, we send a report to the Ohio Department of Education saying, here's all of the testing that occurred for a CTAG related test in the current school year, as well as whatever assent data there is available. And then they add that, combine that with EMIS data and pass that on to the Ohio Department of Higher Education, who puts it into HEI to make that available to the Ohio public colleges and universities. So the problem there is that once we've sent that data to the Ohio Department of Education, we don't have any way to sort of update it. That just doesn't exist. So as a result of all of that, we just can't promise that we'll be able to sort of update previous year data. And we don't want to, obviously we don't want to mislead or anything like that. So that's kind of why it's the current academic year, and that's why you need to retest those students. I will just say, even if you retest those students, we're relying on the highest score they've ever gotten, combined with their most recent Ascent choice. So there's no pressure on the student to be proficient on that test in that sense, because we'll be using the highest score. So if they've already been proficient, they can focus on getting through the test and trying to improve their score without having to worry about the possibility of not being proficient. I mean, obviously, a lot of students, that's not really in their DNA. You want to do as well as you can every time, but just be aware that there's not that pressure if they've already been proficient. So I do hope eventually we'll have some sort of way of like feeding data directly into HEI. That's not a possibility currently. So I hope that helps. I know that's a little bit of a problem. And like I said, we're just doing the best we can to work with the systems that we've got. So.
Well, thank you for that, Richard.
Yeah. And again, if you have questions about that in more depth, or if you have thoughts about ways to sort of handle that, you can always send me an email, support@webexam.org. We're certainly open to any ideas that you have. And you can also contact ODE. I think Ryan Curtis handles that CTAV process. So you can always talk with Ryan or with Matt Winkle, or even with Leah as needed. So just I have found, at least working with them, that they've always been super helpful. And if you need our help, we're happy to do so. But I just hope we can improve that process continually. And then again, while I'm talking about that, as you know, the colleges and higher education institutions do have the ability to access that data. They can see that a student based on SSID has data available in the system, even if they can't see what that data is. And so it is possible for the colleges to get that Ascent and to access that data as needed as part of the admissions process. I'm not directly connected with that. I don't know exactly how that all works, but that is at least a possibility. Okay. Circling back to district testing coordinators. So in the past in WebExam, we had what was called the WebExam hierarchy, where you would arrange all of your teachers and administrators in this giant tree of users that somehow magically worked. What we were finding over the last few years was that it was no longer fit for purpose. It was creating a lot of problems. Like I saw someone from Butler Tech here. Butler Tech had this hierarchy of about like 40 administrators, and each one had to be specifically located in a specific place and was causing problems, and it wasn't the best. So we wanted to switch to a model where you could, by district or JVSD, have a list of users who could access all student data there. And so that's what these district testing coordinators are. And any district or JVSD can have one or more district testing coordinators, and you can be a district testing coordinator for multiple districts as needed. It's entirely flexible in that way. And again, that's just about trying to make things easier and trying to make sure things continue to work. Because it's always frustrating when things don't work like we hope. So that's what district testing coordinators are. If you are a district testing coordinator, you can also add additional coordinators as needed, and you can remove them. You could remove yourself if you're like, I don't want to do this. You're welcome to do that. And as I said, you can, if you are a DTC, you can administer all the programs located in your district, and you can manage all students and teachers that are not assigned to any programs as well. So be aware of that. This is kind of what that screen looks like, where you can see who the district testing coordinators are, and then you can use that blue Edit Administrators button to manage that list. All right. Program support in WebExam, which I think is the hot topic of the year. So in the past, along with that long hierarchy we were talking about, there was also a situation where teachers and students were connected directly together. And so that if a teacher in a program changed, you had to create the new teacher account and then move all the students from one teacher to another. And that also made it impossible for us to know what classes a teacher actually was testing students for until they actually delivered the testing. And all of this was creating a lot of problems, particularly in test activation. So we are adding support for programs based on CTE 26 data that your district has gotten approved by ODE for. And then all the students and administrators, assessors, if necessary, and tests are all grouped into these programs, so that if you end up adding a new teacher, you just add them into that same program and they'll immediately have access to all of the students that are also in that program. And again, it's all about just trying to make things a little bit easier, and particularly easier when it comes to activation. As I mentioned, the district testing coordinator role is there to allow you to manage all the programs in a district. And then within a program, there are restrictions now that can optionally be placed on teachers and administrators to give them sort of limited access rights if you want to sort of use that. So you can give a teacher read-only access so they can't add any new students in. And you can also give a teacher activate-only permissions. So literally all they can do is activate testing sessions for students. And eventually the activate-only will include some reporting based on requests from administrators. We'll be adding that in at some point in the near future. So just so you're aware, the biggest issue with this program support is the transition process from the old system to the new one. So I just wanted to give you a sense of how that was done, where the data that's in WebXam now, or was in WebXam at the start of the year, where it came from, and what can sort of be managed by you. So the application time frame, that's coming from the CTE 26. The name, the building, and the district, the reporting/funding district, and the pathway, that's all coming from CTE 26. Most of that stuff cannot be managed except for the name of the program if you wish to customize it based on how your school is doing things. The last three things, the tests, administrators, teachers, and students, we've tried to build that out based on the testing data from last year, but in an ongoing sense, including via student uploads that can be managed by you. And we can take a look at where that management happens. So there's a programs navigation item in WebXam, and then for any one program, you can access a screen like this, particularly if you're a DTC. There's a few quick things I want to call attention to here. The biggest one is that green copy program button. So when we did the import from the CTE 26s, that's basically one program per program area. Now, in a lot of cases, that's not how things work. You may be running multiple C4 programs, multiple programs, and any other pathway. And so that copy program button allows you to sort of make those multiple programs so you can divide the teachers and students up across multiple, for example, C4 programs. So just be aware of that you, even though the initial process made one program per program area, you can divide that up as you need to. The edit button will allow you to sort of manage all of the sort of teachers and students and administrators in that program if you need to, or to edit the name. The customized tests features allows you to include like a customized name for that test. So if ODE calls the test biomedical research, but in your school, it's actually called, genetics or whatever. You can use that customized test option to customize that name. And again, that hopefully will make it easier for your teachers when they're going through the activation process. They'll see a name that they recognize and be able to make sure they're activating the correct test for students. And then those restrictions that we talked a little bit about earlier allow you to sort of customize the access level that your teachers have. You want to be careful with those restrictions as an administrator, because particularly as it relates to accommodations, since most outputs from like SIS systems from student information systems don't include accommodation data. Sometimes it has to be added after the fact, often by the teachers. And so if you apply a read-only restriction to a teacher, they won't be able to add that information in. So just be aware of those kinds of limitations as you're preparing to use it. But we have found already, I think there are a few districts out there using restrictions to allow maybe teacher aides to do the activation process without having access to student data, which makes a lot of sense to us, and is certainly one of the use cases we were anticipating. So, all right, what is next? Okay, so here's kind of what that edit screen looks like. So you'll notice some of the fields are grayed out because that data is coming from the CTE 26, and we don't want that data to get edited. But the program name, the tests, if there are specific program level administrators, you can add them there. And then the last button there is sort of new. It allows you to mark a program as not active. The CTE 26s, as I'm sure you know, often include programs that aren't currently being used. They might be in the planning process, or they might have expired, whatever it might be. So you can mark a program as not active, and that will mean that when you go through various other forms in WebXam, that program will either not show up, or it will show up separated from the active programs. So that's kind of a new thing that, as we were watching people use the system, that was something that was clearly needed. So just to sort of summarize what we're doing with programs, we're really looking at simplifying activation for teachers. Last year, we saw a large increase in the amount of students who took the wrong test because the teacher activated the wrong test. So we really wanted to cut down on that, because obviously that's time those students could have been receiving instruction. And then they have to retest. It's difficult for everybody involved. So we very much wanted to try to simplify activation, and we hope that will be successful. We also really wanted to simplify user management, particularly for district testing coordinators. So we hope that will help. Another thing that we're focused on is trying to improve the accuracy of those end of year reports. We want to do everything we can to make sure the right data ends up at the right district, so that you can get your EMIS reports done as quickly as possible, so that the students get their CTAG credit, all that happens as seamlessly as possible. And so the programs help with that, because we can use the sort of what's called in the CTE 26 the created by IRN. We can use that as a determination of where to send that testing data to. So we no longer need to ask the teachers during the activation process, hey, who owns this program? We don't have that information based on the CTE 26s. Again, we wanted to make sure we could allow some role customization for districts with special requirements. And then, as I mentioned initially, we wanted to sort of end the use of the WebXam hierarchy, because it was cumbersome and no longer useful in a lot of cases. So the transition process for this is the most difficult part, and we have found over the last few months that every district is different. If you're, if you're a small home district, maybe you have an ag and a business program, something like that. There's often not too much that needs to be done. The process will have worked fairly smoothly. If you're a large career center, a Butler Tech, a Warren, something like that, things can be a little bit more complicated and require a little bit more time. And if you're finding that process cumbersome and difficult and frustrating, do not hesitate to reach out to us at WebXam, support@webexam.org. We are very happy to help. We've worked with a number of districts and career centers so far, and we're happy to continue to do so to sort of make this process go as smoothly as possible. All right, that is programs. I do want to talk about field testing. And one thing I want to mention with field testing is that, and Bridget, I'm not sure if you'll go into this too much, but over the next 3 years, more than half of the subject codes that we have tests for are going to get rewritten. Or field tested. So this year it's business, next year, and this year we'll be writing all of ag and then field testing that next year. And the next year we'll also be writing all of IT and arts communications and then field testing those the year after. That accounts, like I said, for either more than half or nearly half of all the subject codes that WebXam deals with. There is going to be a lot of change going on, and it's going to be really important that we do everything we can to communicate with you and with your teachers, and that you also help your teachers, because it's going to be a lot for them to focus on. Those field testing windows close early, as you see here. This year they close on April 19th. And then also those tests are significantly longer. So to the extent that you can, you need to provide your teachers, students with improved and additional time to complete those tests, particularly if those students have accommodations. And I don't have a slide for this, but while I'm on the topic, I did just want to touch base on accommodations real quickly, just to remind you again that there are accommodations available in WebXam for students with special needs. Many of those are time-based, so you can have extended time, which is sort of like a time and a half. You can have double time where they get twice the amount of time, and you can have unlimited time, which just turns off the clock based on the IEP. If you have students that require a reader, there's a reader built into WebXam that will read the questions out. And when you apply that accommodation, that also includes unlimited time. So the student isn't penalized based on how long it takes a reader to read a question. And then one thing I'll just mention with reader is required, if you have a group of students taking the same test, you can have all of them test at the same time, and all of those questions will be presented to them in the same order. So that way you don't have to do that one-to-one. If you have 5 or 6 students all taking an AFNR test, you can get those students together at the same time and read each question to them, and they will see them all in the same order. And again, that will all happen in unlimited time. If you have EL students who are in the process of learning English, there are some accommodations available as well. Those students can use a dictionary to do the translation process, and you can use the extended time accommodation for those students, even if they don't have an IEP specifically for that purpose. And there's a few other nuances in there as well, so I encourage you to check on our documentation. Last thing, I'll just really quickly mention, if you have students who, for whatever reason, are not able to use a computer, we can offer you printed tests as well. So just keep that in mind. And again, when you have these questions, just feel free to contact us at support@webexam.org. We're happy to help. And with that, Bridget, I pass the torch on to you. And if you have any questions, you'll find me in the chat.
Hey,
You're
Bridget,
muted,
you're
Bridget.
muted.
Oh.
Can everyone see my slides?
Yes.
Awesome, awesome, great. Okay, so who here, you can use the hand raise thing. Who here knows what an assessment blueprint is? Okay, we've got quite a few hands. This is great. Okay, so this means that we've been communicating about this well enough for people to know about it. For anyone who doesn't know what an assessment blueprint is, think about a blueprint for a house. Say you're an architect or in construction. Blueprint for a house tells you how much space each room takes up in a house. It's the same with an assessment. Any kind of test, we need to figure out how many test questions, like what proportion of items are going to cover each content area. So we don't just come up with that kind of like, through guesswork. We want to be methodical, and we want it to be informed by instructors like you. So whenever we start writing test questions for a career field, we send out a survey, probably late August, early September, and then we continue to send it out to people based on each of those content areas within the outline. We ask you a couple of ratings questions to help us figure out how many items to write. Now, you may not be aware of this, but this is actually the method used for most assessments. If you've ever taken a certification exam and you saw more content, there were more items covering certain content areas, this is how they did it. They sent out a survey with all the content areas, and they had people rate certain things like importance or how often they do a certain task or use that particular knowledge area in their jobs. We do the same thing. So we ask everyone who takes the survey to mark which courses they teach or would be willing to fill out ratings based on their expertise, like if they don't teach the course anymore, but they'd like to provide those ratings. And then they rate how important each one of those outcomes within the outline are. So you have your strands, you have your outcomes, and then you have your competencies. We ask at the outcome level. And we also have found that because career tech, is very like a hands-on, it's not like having students take like a reading assessment, for example. Sometimes we want to take into account how easy it is to translate that competence, all those competencies, that outcome into a multiple choice question. So we ask them to rate how feasible it is to write high quality questions for that particular outcome. So this doesn't have as much of an effect on how many items we write as important, but we do like a small correction, just a small adjustment based on those ratings, so that we're not writing like 10, we're not asking our subject matter experts to write 10 questions on something where it's really difficult to translate those skills and knowledge into a multiple choice question. And then we also take into account the number of competencies within that outcome. So if there's a lot of competencies that are included from that outcome in the course outline, then we know that there's a lot more content area in that area. And so we write more questions. And then we've also taken into account the number of must-haves. Does anyone know what a must-have is here? Okay, so for those who don't, a must-have are the content areas that have to be on the test. So that's at the competency level, that most precise, narrow level of content standard within the outline. And so if we have more must-haves in that competency, we know that it's a more important competency. And we also have to make sure that we cover that in the assessment if we can. So we write more questions for those outcomes. Now, for most of you who have probably seen this, because a lot of you instructors raised your hands. We actually publish the assessment blueprints on our website. Now that said, we actually do it at the bank level. So we write the test questions based on those numbers of competencies. We don't publish exactly how many items are on the post test, just how many we've written to in the bank, because that it also covers what will be in the pre-test, and we don't want to, encourage people to just basically like study to the post test, but it will be assessed in some context, either as a pre-test or the post-test. That said, usually the post-test matches the bank pretty closely. We actually use an algorithm to make sure that we try to match it as closely to the bank as possible, but it's not going to be exact. We just do that so people don't, like go through and say like, I know there's going to be exactly this many questions on the post-test. But you will have a good sense of what's going to be covered more, because it is going to be pretty close. It's just not going to be the exact percentage. So that's the main way you can be involved. It's the least time consuming. You provide ratings for each time you provide ratings for a course, it's going to be like maybe 5 minutes to provide those ratings. Since we are doing agriculture courses this year, is anyone here an agriculture instructor? I do not see any raised hands, so this might not be as relevant to you this year, but you should be aware of it. We've already sent out that survey, but there's other ways you can be involved that will require you to, coordinate with our recruitment team. But there's lots of ways that you can help us write the assessments and, make sure that you have a voice in this process. So besides the blueprint survey, we also align the old items, and we might make some changes or some updates to them, and that's just an emergency test bank. And that's not necessarily just test questions that were on the post-test, like it's some of the extra questions that we had before and some of the questions are in the pre-test. There's usually quite a lot of extra questions we write just in case, and then those old banks get updated in the fall. We will be doing that in October this year for all the old agriculture courses. And then we'll also be recruiting for the item writing workshops. That's when we actually write the test questions. And we'll begin doing the workshops. They're all on Zoom now for the most part, except for aligning the old items, because we're exposing the whole test bank. You would just have to commit 6 hours of your time in total about, and it would be broken up into 2-hour sessions. You'd help write a subset of test questions, and then you would review a larger subset in a larger group to discuss them and make sure that they're the best they can be. We'll continue the item writing and recruiting for future item writing workshops through the winter, and usually in the spring. I think this year we're going through May, maybe even early June, because we're writing a lot more courses. We also have something called Plan B workshops. So is anyone here a business, finance, or marketing instructor? I don't see any raised hands. So this also may not be as relevant to people here this time, but we use certain statistics. And these are the best practices in any kind of assessment, from licensure to certification to training assessments. We use statistics to figure out which questions are the best test questions. And that's one of the reasons that we field test all of the items, because we are not going to score a student on those questions until we have those statistics that tell us that those are good test questions. That said, sometimes we don't have as many people take the field test as we'd like. So the statistics are a little less accurate than they normally are. So we do another layer of quality control where we have some subject matter experts come in and look at the test forms and confirm that all of those test questions look good. And then in the spring, after we've done that Plan B process, if needed, because sometimes we don't need it for any courses, if we have a lot of students in each course, we close that field test. We rescore the students based on the items that we included on the post-test. That post-test is now only 40 items. If you have that graduating senior that needs to retake the assessment because they didn't pass it during field testing, as Richard mentioned, they can retake it before the school year is done. And so they'll be able to see their scores and see that they didn't do as well as they thought. For example, and they can make that decision because everyone will be rescored, and they can retake the shorter post-test version. And then that pretty much wraps up things for the most part. One thing we also do is we set the cut score and get more validation data on the items that we wrote that year. So we call that validation and standard setting. And this again is another process that's done in everything from employment to certification exams. We get subject matter experts to look at the test questions, and they provide ratings that help us determine how likely it would be that a minimally proficient candidate would get that test question right. So we do the method where they say yes they would or no they wouldn't. And then also, this is when we do our system improvements, that all the lovely things that Richard has mentioned, like the new updates to the interface. We tend to do that in the summer, so because students are not testing, so it's easier to, go into the system and make those changes. So that's how we write the assessments. If you are not an agriculture instructor or business, finance, and marketing instructor, it probably won't affect you this year, but I would prefer, that you remember this, and then when we write more test questions, you get involved in the process, or if you know anyone who is an agriculture instructor, just send their information along to us, and they can help us write test questions. Does anyone have any questions for me about the item writing process and how you get involved when we're writing those new test questions? Don't be shy. I don't bite if anyone has questions. Oh, is anyone? Oh, no questions in chat. Now, Richard, does anyone have any questions for Richard about the interface or anything? Anything he talked about?
Well, you must have nailed it, Bridget.
So no questions. So that's all the slides we had. I will stop sharing and pass it on to our lovely hosts if they want to talk about anything.
Well, Richard, I just combined your names.
Combine our names, yeah. Yeah,
That was cool. That's like if we were a celebrity
Richard
couple,
is
that would
perfect.
Yes. Sorry.
We were a celebrity power couple. That would be a
Right.
wonderful, wonderful couple name.
You can go the rest of the day saying, we're now Richard. But Bridget and Richard, thank you so much for taking time out of your morning to join us, because these updates are really important, and we love how responsive WebXam is to the field. And so that partnership with ODE and the field is great for making sure our students have all the things they need to show what they've learned in their career tech courses.
Again, thank you for inviting us. We're happy to do this any chance we get. I've been hearing from other state support team regions wanting the same sort of presentations. So you have blazed a trail.
So just to finish out real quick, everyone, we always do a few updates by SST and state's tech prep region. So for 13, and we'll have these slides and Richard and Bridget's slides available for you as well, along with their recording. We made a Padlet, so everything's easy to access this year. But when you get your slides, if you click on the SST 13 updates, that'll take you to the SST 13 PD calendar. And so they do all kinds of things with special ed, literacy, PBIS, transition. Some of my stuff is on there as well. And then I made a s'more just to make sure if you needed something specific and wanted to sign up, it's on there. So in October, we've got some overviews of career-based intervention and job training coordination from Chelsea Canterbury from ODE. So if that's something you're interested in for the following year, hop on so you can learn about how to do those programmings, and then talk with your CTPD lead about the CTE 26 process. And then I'm also going to do a couple of sessions on Ohio Means Jobs. I know some of that has gotten crazy the past couple of years with the changes to their site and the login process. So those sessions are open right now to register. And then in tech prep, Southwest and West, Pam or Rita, do you want to talk about the work-based learning?
Go ahead, Pam, I'll let you take this one.
Okay. Thanks, Rita. We are planning a career tech work-based learning coordinators meetup. I'm sure many on the call today have received the meeting invite. It'll be October 3rd and held at Miami Valley CTC. If you did not get a meeting invite, or you did not know of the meeting and would like to attend, please feel free to reach out to me, and I will make sure you're added to the list.
Right. And then updates from the Southwest region.
Right. We just have a few things that's going on. I'll be brief in going through these, but we do have the Ohio Healthcare Education and Workforce Leadership virtual webinar that is actually coming up. I guess that's this week. It is 12 to 1, and it's a statewide. It's something that we do that's statewide. If you're interested in the healthcare and things that are going on, we're actually going to be talking. Anne's on here. We're actually going to be talking about some of our regional MOUs or bilateral agreements. So it's a best practice kind of share out. We had the Health Force, which that's Helena with the Health Collaborative, McKinney. October 4th, it's at Great Wolf Lodge. I know there's quite a few students that have signed up already, or teachers that have signed up their students. So it's always a big event. If you're interested, I do have the link there. It's on our Southwest Tech Prep website, so you can find out more information on that. We do have the ODE Perkins 5 Comprehensive Local Needs Assessment. This is something that we're combining the West region, the Southwest region, and also the Central region. And that's November 15th. We are happy to say that the state has been working with us to get these dates early. We also have our Southwest Regional CTE 26 virtual workshop, something different. We haven't done this in the past, but we're kind of doing a virtual one for those of you that want to get all the new updates, everything. Dee Sturgill's going to be presenting at this one. And then we'll be doing an in-person one that on a CTE 26 workshop on in January. So, and I'm looking, my dates covered January 18th. So, and that's going to be from 9 to 12. I'm still searching on the location. And then we also have our Southwest Tech Prep Success Bound that's coming in February, where we have engineering and IT instructors. And we have, you know, hands-on workshops. If you want more information, registration has not gone out, has not, you know, been released or anything on that one. So just be on the lookout. It should be coming your way. And I'll turn it over to Pam.
Thanks, Rita. As Rita mentioned, the Perkins 5 for both our regions, along with Central Region, will be November 15th, again at Miami Valley. We will be holding an in-person CTE 26 workshop on January 9th, again at Miami Valley. And the ODE Quality Program Review Workshop will be held the end of January at Miami Valley CTC. I'd like you to hold the date for our Success Bound Conference, an annual conference held at Sinclair Community College on March 6th. And the Perkins Local Needs Assessment Workshop will be held April 23rd. Those of you in the West region probably already have these dates. A lot of the registration information will come out from ODE, but if you have not seen anything or are curious about when that might occur, feel free to reach out to me. Melissa, thank you for allowing us the opportunity to talk about our upcoming events.
Thank you.
Sure. And Carrie, do you have anything to add? I didn't know if you had anything special set up for 10.
Nope, still getting my feet wet as a rookie.
Okay. Carrie and I are combining a lot of things this year. So if you need something, don't hesitate to sign up for things that are being offered from other regions. And Carrie will join in as well. We do have today at 3 o'clock our first meetup for counselors and intervention specialists that work in career tech. And we have a few people signed up. Just with us moving, it took a little while to get everything organized and registration forms and everything ready. But we're excited to talk with them today and see what they've got going on. And then we'll be back with our next coffee chat. I believe it's in January. Is it in January? Yep. We're doing them quarterly this year. If something pops up and we need to grab everyone together to share some important news, we will definitely do that. I did put a link in the chat for the feedback. If there's anything you guys need or want more information on, please don't hesitate to reach out to Rita, Pam, Carrie, or myself, Deb, Terry. We'll get that information to you and work on pulling some learning together if there's something you all need. Anybody have any other questions today? All right, well, we'll stay on for a minute if you find you do have a question. But other than that, have a great Tuesday. Enjoy this beautiful fall weather in Southwest Ohio, and happy the Bengals brought home a win last night.
Yeah.
Oh, I forgot to do the bookmark, the Padlet. Oh, well, I've got everybody's email address. I'll send that out to everybody. Just so you guys know, here's what our Padlet looks like. And I did
So do you
put-
want to turn the recording off or do you want the recording on?
Oh, yeah, thank you.